And now I have the real honor to introduce our guest speaker for this, our family and friend service. Interesting to note, this service began many, many years ago, called Family and Friends, because it was the service that people would invite straight people to, because the rest of the year, straight people typically wouldn't come to a CBST service. And so many people were closeted in the congregation that sometimes they felt they didn't want to be outed by not knowing who was going to come. So they dedicated in the very early years a service that would be a little special that way, and also then honor those straight allies in our community. Now at CBST, it's another one of our fabulous gay pride services, and we do typically love to celebrate allies who are doing really important work in the world, for which we are deeply grateful and want to honor them. And tonight, we're thrilled to have honoring our presence in this particularly difficult week. Letitia James, known best, of course, here in New York City as Tish James, Tish James is the public advocate for the city of New York, which is the second highest ranking elected office in the city. Tish is the first woman of color to hold a citywide position in New York City history. Now, that is a shame on one level, and we're thrilled it's you on another level, but how long did that have to take? Letitia James is a strong advocate for criminal justice reform and has led the push for police body-worn cameras in the NYPD. She has a long history, as we all who are New Yorkers know, as an advocate for children and families, and is working to reform New York City's foster care system, as well as one of the leaders in ensuring that the city increases shelter beds for LGBT runaway and homeless youth. Ms. James is a leading voice in the fight for civil rights for all New Yorkers and has been a prominent advocate for designating the Stonewall Inn as a historic site. Stay tuned, that might be happening very soon. She has established an LGBTQ task force that works to ensure housing rights for individuals with AIDS here in New York and promoted mental health initiatives for LGBT New Yorkers. She has established a very important hate crimes task force which works together with Jewish and Muslim leaders in the city to combat hate crimes with education and advocacy. She is a lawyer, and Ms. James previously served as an assistant attorney general and a public defender. And it is a real honor for our congregation to welcome you to address us on this important night. Ms. Letitia James.
Thank you. Are you going to throw candy at me? I was waiting. No, it represents, candy represents the sweetness of life, and I thank you for that. So, a member who works in the Office of Public Advocate, Gabriel, who is here with us this afternoon, when I was walking in, said, "Tish, have you ever been to a Shabbat service?" And I said, "Yeah. You know, I'm honorary Jewish. As a former member of the city council, I represented the Lubavitch community in Crown Heights. So for 10 years, I represented Crown Heights. And so he looked at me and said, "It's a little different." Because I was looking for the ladies section. You know, I'm known in the Lubavitch community, I'm known in the Satmar community, and, you know, so I apologize. But let me begin with a prayer, and it's a prayer that I found on page 105. We pray that we might know before whom we stand, the power whose gift is life, who quickens those who have forgotten how to live. We pray for winds to disperse the choking air of sadness, for cleansing rains to make parched hopes flower, and to give all of us the strength to rise up towards the sun. We pray for love to encompass us for no other reason, save that we are human, for love through which we may blossom into persons who have gained power over our lives. We pray to stand upright. We've fallen to be healed, we sufferers. We pray to break the bonds that keep us from the world of beauty. We pray that our eyes are open to our authentic selves. We pray that we may walk in the garden of a purposeful life. Our own power is in touch with the power of the world. As I was sitting here, I wrote my own prayer, because there is a sweet spirit in this place, a light that shines so bright that it restores my soul and that it brings tears to my eyes, a presence that reassures me that all is well with my soul. And as you sing the songs, as you welcome Shabbat, please do not be afraid of the darkness, for God is with all of us. The undulating songs followed of spiritual songs, and songs followed by praise. And as I recognize the universal swaying as we pray for healing and for universal love. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me here today, and thank you for allowing me to say a few words. First, to your wonderful rabbi, Rabbi Kleinbaum, who has done so much in our city, thank you for having me here tonight. Of course, to my very good friend, Randy Weingarten, who has been a leader not only in New York City, but all across this nation. To Eric Goldstein from UJ, thank you for being a friend. To Rabbi Levite, thank you for being here. And for Dr. Goldstein, thank you for making me feel at ease. And to Louis Goldstein, thank you for your countless number of emails. Love you more. And thank you to the entire congregation for welcoming me to your Shabbat services tonight. Let us begin by reflecting on the lives lost. May they rest in peace. But may we never, those living, may we never rest in peace until we can influence those who have been inactive and those who unfortunately are under the influence of the NRA. Hopefully one day, as a result of all of this, may they begin to protect all of us. I think this week, more than most weeks, we yearn for Shabbat to come, for that time of peace and solitude, and for a time to reflect on the events of this past week, a time to try to process and understand how a person or a group of people can have this kind of hate in their hearts. It feels very uplifting that this week's portion, Naso, can literally be translated into lift up, something we desperately need to feel in our communities and in our homes this week. Lifting each other up, our hearts and our minds and our spirits. Lifting communities together in a spirit of unity and not division. We've come into this space because it is the tie that binds us all. Because what happened in Orlando was an attempt to tear apart the very fabric of our society with hate, violence, and terror. And when the shooter directed fire in a gay club on Latin night, it was a direct attack on the LGBTQ community and a devastating impact on our Latino community. And while we can't bring back the victims and we can't take away this pain, it's what we do in the face of this pain that defines us. Thousands of people throughout this country and across the world gathered to denounce this violence that was directed at the LGBTQ community and the Latino community. And just as importantly, they gathered to show their support for the Muslim community. We did it at Stonewall. We did it in Jackson Heights. We did it in Brooklyn. We did it in the Bronx. And as I leave here tonight, we will do it in Staten Island. Because we are too strong to be torn apart. We are a country made stronger and more beautiful by our individuality and our collective humanity. And these attacks are something that all of us know all too well. The LGBT community, the Jewish community, and the African American community. And I know that throughout history, Jews have faced oppression. You have faced violence and bigotry and hatred simply for the God that you pray to. And when I went to Israel last year, I visited Yad Vashem, and I mourned for the 6 million Jews who perished simply because they was Jews, and I felt the pain. I climbed to the top of Masada, and I learned of the great struggle the Jews faced against the Romans, and I felt that pain. I felt that pain as I marched in Jackson Heights this week with the transgender community, a community that feels pain whenever they try to apply for a job or whenever they try to find a home. I feel their pain. And as a black woman, I too have tasted pain. But I think it's how far we have come and how much Jews and African Americans, two historically marginalized groups, have done for each other, how much they have worked together to support each other. You see, the Jewish community has a strong history of standing shoulder to shoulder with the black community. And as my parents taught me, Jewish storekeepers were some of the only Southern merchants who addressed black customers as Mr. and Mrs. and permitted them to try on clothing. As my mother from Virginia and my father from South Carolina taught me, it was the Jewish community that was one of the earliest supporters of groundbreaking civil rights organizations like the NAACP and the Urban League. As a graduate of Howard University Law School, I know and I studied the fact that when the fight for integration hit the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education, it was the research commissioned by the American Jewish Committee, their amicus briefs by the Anti-Defamation League and the American Jewish Congress that helped justice prevail. I know that you joined with Thurgood Marshall, and I know that you stood with us all throughout history, Jews and African Americans working together to demonstrate that they were no different than anyone else. The partnership between our community is natural, and both the African American and Jewish communities know the ugly face of oppression, of being torn from their families and homelands in horrific ways. Our histories are inextricably tied, but more importantly, so is our future. We carry the responsibility of making this world a better place to live, and so that our children can play together. It's about standing up against injustice and intolerance wherever we see it in our world. But we can only do this when we work together. And that is why I am so glad to be in this space when you're led by this wonderful Rabbi Kleinbaum, who has stood arm in arm and shoulder to shoulder with civil rights leaders against a wide range of human and civil rights here in our city. And I'm incredibly proud to work with so many of you, our Jewish brothers and sisters in New York City, to fight against injustice that still exists, and which we know comes in so many different forms, from violent hate crimes to insensitive governments who don't provide the vital services diverse communities need. You see, there is no place for bigotry and hatred in New York City, and we have a responsibility to be the guiding light of the nation. And all New Yorkers, regardless of race and religion and gender and income or sexual orientation, are bestowed with the same God-given rights. And we need everyday people to stand up and raise their voices and be individual beacons for love and equality. So when people, or even worse, presumptive leaders of this country call out for a ban on any group of people based on their religion, their race, or the person they choose to love, we need to show responsibility by rejecting those calls. 70 years ago, we said never again. And never again in our lifetime, in our parents' lifetime, or our children's lifetime, will we allow this type of hate or allow someone to elicit this type of fear. And today we must continue to say never again, but it is time that our actions must follow. My Orthodox friends have taught me, or have tried to teach me, Judaism, and one of my favorite teachings I remember is the concept of tikkun olam. I hope I said that correctly. And I know that they taught me about repairing the world. And somewhere and nowhere is that more important than right here at this congregation. And it is that sweet spirit in this room, sweet spirit in this room, that we must work together to continue to repair our world. Because too often there is a perceived conflict between religion and sexual orientation, resulting in many people feeling ostracized or unaccepted by religious communities or the faiths they have long felt connected. And sadly, we witnessed that this firsthand last week in the tragedy in Orlando. The gunman, a devout Muslim who did not think his religion would ever be accepting of who he loved. But in fact, religion is about inclusion, acceptance, and love. Religion is about bringing people together to celebrate in good times and have a shoulder to lean on in those hard and sad times. It is about a loving God, and not a God who judges, and not a vindictive God, but a loving and welcoming God. It is not about what you look like or who you choose to love. We should encourage people of all backgrounds to stay connected in their faith and not discourage them. You have provided this unbelievable safe space for people from all walks of life to be able to pray in peace and to be drawn nearer to a loving and comforting God. And so we need to practice tikkun olam. Our world needs some repairing. Our faith needs some restoring. And our hearts need some healing. And so we've come here this evening to hold one another, to cry, to seek comfort from a world that needs repairing, oh God. And so we need to work together. Jews and blacks, gays and straights, young and old, to fight back against the ugly face of hate that shows too frequently. I've seen it in Brooklyn. I've seen it recently on Staten Island where a church was firebombed. I've seen swastikas all over the city. And we also need to work together to elect a leader of this country that accepts all people and a government that will protect us and not the NRA. We need to work together to ensure that people don't have access to military-style weapons, weapons that do not belong in schools, in movie theaters, or dance halls, synagogues, or in urban centers all across America. We need to work together to teach our children from a young age that what is different amongst us is what is beautiful about us, and that there is no better time than the Sabbath to understand these teachings. And as we welcome the Sabbath tonight, we must rest and we must pray. We must pray for peace and love and tolerance in our city and in our country, because hope and faith and love cannot be ripped from us. Love is love is love is love. And love, my friends, always wins. So let us respond to these events by expanding the web of tolerance and understanding and love. And let us all unite against those who would preach hate and who would stir a tide of hatred and prejudice. Let us break down walls and barriers, and let all of us climb to the mountaintop together. And let us never forget those who died dancing at the Pulse Club. And may the pulse of all good people continue to demand change. And may we continue to dance for those who can no longer dance. And let us dance next Sunday as we dance down Fifth Avenue in pride and progress. As we celebrate love. Shabbat Shalom. And thank you for having me.